This is my first time in Romania, clearly my first time in Bucharest. I find it really endearing. I mean, it has the qualities of an old city with real distinction, with real beauty. It has a feeling of warmth. The people that I've encountered have been engaging, have been friendly, have been helpful. I mean, in the end, I end up feeling badly because it would really be great to spend 10 days or something and go around the country and see all of the beauty that's here. Maybe I'll be able to come back sometime. I enjoy it. I mean, there are 9 jurors, so I'm one of 9. And they're talented people, they're really interesting people, they're accomplished people. And most of them I've met earlier. And one of them was on one of my tours of America some 30 years ago as a concertmaster, you know, with something called the Moscow Virtuosi, which was a group organized by Vladimir Spivakov. And he was on tour playing concertmaster. Boris Garlitsky, and his little son was on tour. He was 7 years old. The son was so interested in what was happening in a concert, backstage, on a tour. Whenever his father walked out as concertmaster or Vladimir walked out as conductor, he would hold the door. You know, he wanted to be part of it. So one day I said to him, I'm appointing you assistant stage manager. For a rehearsal, we'll pay you $3, and for a concert, we'll pay you $5. And then we made, you know, signed the paper. Well, this kid had the time of his life at age 7, you know, with some presence, some authority, some engagement, some involvement. Now he's a really good jazz musician that plays a lot in New York. But Boris was, because I toured that ensemble quite often, and he was a great colleague and a great musician. And to re-engage with people like that, you know, Sitkovetsky, I knew his mother, Bela Davidovich, a long time ago. I mean, there's a rich history there, you know. And Mihaela Martin, when she won Indianapolis competition, she came to my office and I was her manager. And of course, Markovici is famous, you know, I mean, she has, even though she's not playing today, she has a big profile and a big tradition. So meeting and engaging with those jurors, I find always rewarding. The opportunity I'm one of the people in the business that actually believes in competitions. A lot of artists say, don't do a competition, competitions are bad, they're, you know. And I don't take that point of view. I take the point of view that if you want to be a musician on stage with a public that hopefully not only hears your music, but enjoys it and begins to appreciate you, everything you're doing is a competition. If you go to play Carnegie Hall as a violinist, it's not unimportant that Milstein played there, that Isaac Stern played there, that Yehudi Menuhin played there, that Itzhak Perlman. It's not important at all, because that hall, that community, that audience knows those traditions, knows the musical values and engagements of those traditions. And every time you walk on stage, somebody's going to say, that was really interesting. Or they're going to say, oh, that was boring. But your life is to engage your art with other people. So I look at a competition as a chance for a young person to come. Basically, it's good if they, even on the level that they just have to focus on repertoire and get certain repertoire prepared to a high standard, because you have to do that in your life anyway. And sometimes you need the pressure of someone saying, get it done by now, And so I think there's a plus side to that. If you think of it negatively, then you're thinking of your own growth negatively. And there's the chance to meet other young musicians. Some of them will become your friends. Some of them will become your colleagues. Some of them may become people that help open doors for you later in life. And some of the jurors may turn out later to say to someone, this young person really plays, you should think about this, you know. So the contact, the engagement, the establishing relationships, I think is a huge thing to gain from a competition. Then you get different people, those that didn't come to the finals are talking to the jurors, you know, what about my playing? I didn't pass to the finals. What kind of advice, what kind of... I find that potentially so enriching for a young person. And Enescu has a huge name. Yeah, a bit because of the composer, but more because of the success of the Enescu Festival, which is one of the great international festivals. So to come and be engaged with that, be in this environment, which is another thing, you know, musicians, they all want to be world famous. You know, you never hear musicians say, I want to be famous just in my own country. No, they want to be world famous. So to get to a Romania and to absorb something about the culture, something about its music, something about its history, or to go to France, or to go to Russia, or doesn't matter where. Now there's a huge competition in Shanghai, you know. Culturally, that's also adding to the growth and the development of a young artist. And sometimes you have to remember, yes, you're a musician, yes, you're a violinist, or whatever your instrument is, you're also an artist. That's a bigger definition than I play the violin. So the psychology, how a young person learns to engage with all these different elements of a career, local, national, international, competitive, sometimes political, because there are government functions that artists become important in. That's all significant for their growth. So for a festival like this, I think it's tremendous for the young people, and I think even if they don't pass in a given round, you know, to stay a little longer and to get to know some of the musicians or some of the people associated a little better can be a very healthy thing. So that's my perspective on that. I think the biggest challenge for an artist, someone becoming an artist, is not social awareness, which is important, is not repertoire, which is extremely important. It's not just contacts, you know, which people hear you, which people support you, which people speak to the next person, or it's whether you get to know who you are, whether you get to know yourself as a human being, because that answer is a different answer than as a musician or an artist. It's the process which often gets sort of skipped of maturing. You can't mature if you don't deal with who you are. What are your strengths? What are your talents? What are your core values? How do you live a positive, productive life with those values? Then you come to the musical side. There are a lot of musicians, you know, if you could somehow survey 400 years of playing the piano, I'm sure the conclusion would be that there are thousands of people today who can play the piano technically at a higher standard than was ever played before. Same with violin or cello. But then the question is, so what? So what point do you get beyond learning how to play it? There's a great artist, Sir Andras Schiff, who years ago was kind of a mentor for a brilliant young lady pianist who was 20 at the time. She wanted to play Schubert and all of the great repertoire. all the great German repertoire. And he asked her if she read any of the German poetry, if she read any of the literature, if she knew what was her association with the culture in which Schubert evolved. Well, she knew nothing. Could she play the piano? She could play the piano wonderfully. She had tremendous fingers, and they were sensitive. She could change colors when the piece needed to sound more French and less German. How an artist finds the standard, his own, you have to have a standard in life, you have to have a standard in your art. And once you find your standard, then it's important to only acknowledge that your process of growing means you have to increase or enhance or raise the standard, which you can only do by absorbing more that contributes to the culture. I've been on a lot of juries. I've been on piano juries, I've been on violin juries, I've been on organ juries, I've been on a Bach jury, there's 3 times. There's the whole thing about juries. What should the makeup, maybe most people don't care. I care. What should the makeup of the jury be? Who should be on it? What should be represented among the jurors? Whenever I did the Bach competitions, most of the jury were piano professors. The person I picked first was never the person they picked first. They were looking for different things. They wanted to know about the fingers. I heard one of my jurors say yesterday, well, so-and-so, she missed a lot of notes when she played that. Yes, she did. It didn't actually ruin the performance. She was communicating something, The famous pianist Anton Rubinstein once said, and this goes back because he's been dead quite a few years, and he said, there are many pianists who can play notes better than me. There are many pianists, they can play maybe faster, maybe more accurately than me, but they can't make music like I make music. It wasn't his ego that was speaking. That was simply true. I was the chair of the jury, if you can believe that, and one of my jury members was the organist of Notre Dame in Paris. Fantastic organist. When we voted, my 1, 2, 3 was his 3, 2, 1. And I said, why is my number 3 your number 1, my number 1 your number 3? And my number 1, as he heard it, had chosen a couple of registrations in the organ that weren't literally in the score. I said, well, that isn't what I listen to, I don't really care what the registration was. I thought he made the piece whole. I thought he played the piece for the audience. It was the best sound and the best performance. I'm looking for someone who can go on stage and can communicate. A professor's looking for someone, how well do they play that? How well do they play that? It's valid, but it's only part of the answer. It's the real answer in the end. What are they doing all this for anyway? So that they can go on a stage and play a piece where the audience sits back and says, that was beautiful. That's communication. That's the power of music. It's the same in theater. I often tell young musicians, you're in the world of theater. You think it's music and you think you're special. All of this is about theater. You're going on stage. You have lights, you have camera, you have audience, you have a script. What's the difference of you playing Beethoven and Sir Laurence Olivier playing Shakespeare? Get a mindset that's much bigger than, how do I do these fingerings? How do I? And in the end, I'm looking for someone who communicates, who you sit back and say, whew, I'm glad I heard that. And in a competition, let me put it another way, which is hard for anybody to deal with. It can be good. It can be even very good. That may not be good enough. Because how are you measuring good? How they look? How many notes were they accurate on? Or did you get the message? Did you get the connection? Did you get the spirit of whatever the composer put in the music? Now, I think everybody should look for the same thing. Yep. But if your role is to learn, you're going to spend a lot of time being focused on the techniques. And if your role is to teach, you're going to spend a lot of time. So what is the point where as a teacher you sit back and say, wait a minute, don't practice 5 hours a day. Practice 2 and go off and read this and watch this film and see this play, read this poetry. Get the artist involved in much more than the physical activity. I've managed Anne-Sophie Mutter for 38 years. She plays a Stradivarius. And I've often said, if you took that Stradivarius and you gave it to 10 different musicians to play, you wouldn't hear the same sound. And certainly not the same sound that she has. In '92, Wolfgang Riem wrote her concerto, which she recorded with the Chicago Symphony. Really contemporary piece that made different demands on the artist and on the instrument. Since then, as you may know, she's had a lot of living composers write for her. I mean, she's sort of championed that. But after playing that and recording that, first thing she said is, he writes things that a violinist is not supposed to be able to play, right? And after she had done it, she said, I learned something about what my instrument can do that I didn't know. This young 13-year-old, of all the contestants, is the one who has a relationship with her instrument. What does that mean? I felt she was more comfortable with her instrument. Everybody's comfortable. We're talking, good is not always good enough. She's more comfortable. She loved playing. It was obvious she loved playing it more. She had an involvement, which means she had an imagination about what she can bring to the instrument and what the instrument can bring to her imagination. The 13-year-old is one of 3 finalists, and deservedly so. The thing about a competition is, do you have an age limit, not how young, but how old? And you just have to decide what's healthy. But can a 13-year-old do it? Yehudi Menuhin made his debut at age 11. Isaac Stern made his debut at age 11. Loren Mazel, as a conductor, conducted the New York Philharmonic at age 11. Talent is talent, So, and sometimes the older ones are the ones that didn't have to be there. Or maybe they had to be there, but they aren't as interesting as what's going on. It's all how a young person takes, not just to the instrument, not just to the technique, but to the art. And the art has real life. It has spirit. It has expression. And this 13-year-old is pretty amazing. There are other amazing people, but you asked me the question of a particular person. Because now I'm showing you my values. I would like first to refer back to everything I have just told you. Because in the end, success really comes with growth. It comes with real development in all of the dimensions that we have just discussed. Now, you can do that and nobody know about it. So then there's that business element of how do you get acknowledged? How do you get seen, heard, appreciated? That in the 21st century, I think is harder than ever before. There's sort of two parts to my answer. One is it's kind of a social media thing, which we'll come to in a moment. The other is, especially for a young person, I'd say consider yourself a pebble. And I pick up this little pebble and I drop it in a pool and you see ripples. Now ripple one is your mother or whoever it is that says, I have a piano for you, now sit down and I'll take you to a teacher. And ripple two is the teacher. And those ripples, think of in the life expanding. There are people that support you, that influence you, that judge you, maybe even hate you, but you're building circles of support, circles of being known. And as you get older, they become people who have more contacts. And how you build those contacts, those relationships, and who connects to you and supports you and helps you find the next supporter, the next engagement, the next, and eventually that becomes other musicians. Often you need a different teacher. There are different stages where you should jump on to another teacher, and all that's part of that, how you get acknowledged. So by the time you get to be late teens, you should have a circle with some dimension. If you don't, you have to start thinking about why I don't and what do I do. Part of that so often turns out to be competitions. Nothing wrong with that, except that's where you meet more people, that's where you travel. You meet different audience, you meet different musicians, you meet different jurors, play for a different orchestra maybe. Acknowledgement comes from the value you establish and the contacts along the way. Yeah? And who you get to play for that says, wow, I'll help you do this, I'll engage you for this, I'll refer you to that. A huge part of it is that person to person. That's a big endeavor for a young person to not only think about his music, but think about who his life is engaged with. Then you get down to the promotion part, you know. And now it's such a social media world. Eugene Ormandy, he conducted the Philadelphia Orchestra for 44 years, and he was towards the end of his career. And I asked him one day, I said, how come you're the lowest paid music director of all American conductors? And he said, I don't need it. I said, what do you mean? He said, my records with RCA Victor, this is 1971, earned $250,000 a year. I don't know what that would be today, it'd be 4 or 5 million, yeah? In today's world, artists pays for their own recording. The business of where the record company came up with a budget, produced the record, made the record, distribute, that's gone. So then that's part of the new dimension of what business is an artist in, how do they get acknowledged, how do they get a profile, how do they get seen and heard. It's not the same mechanism of signing with a recording company or an agent, it's more complicated than that. And most of them are finding ways to pay for their own recording, and then the record company pays a license, you know. You've given it to us, now we'll distribute it, and we'll give you a royalty. And even getting in advance, you know, sign a record and get in advance, not in today's world. Taking an ad in the New York Times, which used to be a big deal, doesn't mean anything anymore. So the whole mechanism, the whole business, whether it's recording or broadcast or a public relations person or an agent manager, is really complicated, and you have to arrive at a state as an artist where you can engage in all of that and not be overwhelmed or saying, what do I do? You know, there are famous musicians who say, forget competitions. Yeah? And my dear friend Mihaela thinks there are too many of them. Okay, maybe they are. On the other hand, there are more people studying piano than ever in the history of the world. They need to study with somebody, they need to be heard by somebody. You know, when Lang Lang came around, all of a sudden Steinway's business in China just went skyrocketed. They had 5 million kids studying piano out of nothing. The whole energy of business in the 21st century is different. And that's what an artist has to deal with. And whether they get an agent that's really good for them, sometimes agent-artist works, sometimes it doesn't. You know, it's like a marriage, I suppose. But you need an agent. You need people to promote you. You need chances to audition, which is also in a way what a competition is.